always thought we were one of those couples. You know, the ones who made it through the rough patches. 10 years of marriage, 2 kids, the house in the suburbs, nothing flashy, just stable. But then, about 6 months ago, things started to change. Our sex life, which had never been perfect, suddenly dried up. Karen stopped reaching for me in bed. At first, I thought it was stress, work, the kids, maybe even just routine. But after weeks of the same excuse, I'm tired, or not tonight, I couldn't ignore the gut feeling that something was off. It wasn't just the sex. Karen had become distant in other ways, too. She was glued to her phone more often, laughing at texts I wasn't part of. And the phone? Always locked. She used to be more open, but now I couldn't remember the last time I saw her phone screen. Something gnawed at me, and I hated it. I didn't want to be that guy, suspicious, paranoid, but I couldn't help it. I started noticing little things. She'd go out with her friends more often, dressed nicer than usual. Nights out turned into full evenings, and she always had a perfect alibi. I tried to brush it off. Maybe she just needed space, a break from the daily grind. But the more I saw her drift away, the more I questioned everything. One night, I stayed up, waiting for her to fall asleep. Her phone was on the bedside table, like always. I gently reached for it, my heart pounding as if I were a thief in my own house. The screen lit up, locked. She had changed her passcode again. I tried a few combinations, our anniversary, the kids' birthdays, but no luck. That's when I realized it. Karen was hiding something, and I was going to find out what it was, no matter what. It was late, probably close to 2 a.m., when I finally cracked her phone. Karen had fallen into a deep sleep, and I was determined. I tried the code one more time, our wedding anniversary, and to my surprise, the screen unlocked. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands trembling as I scrolled through her messages. Most of her chats were harmless. Messages from her coworkers, her friends, nothing that set off alarms. But then I saw it, Samantha's book club. I had never heard Karen mention Samantha, much less any book club. The name itself felt off, like a cover for something else. My stomach twisted as I opened the thread. The messages weren't about books. They were explicit, detailed, and disgusting. Talks about meetups with other couples, about swinger parties. My world stopped. These weren't just flirtatious texts. Karen was deep in this. I saw discussions about boundaries, about privacy, about masks to maintain anonymity. My throat tightened as I scrolled further, and that's when I saw the pictures. Karen, in a red mask, wearing almost nothing. She was with strangers, men, women, people I didn't recognize, all of them dressed the same, all of them hiding behind masks. My wife, the woman I had built my life with, was attending swinger parties. It was like a punch to the gut. I stared at the images, unable to comprehend how this could be real. My fingers felt numb, scrolling through pictures and messages that detailed secret lives, casual hookups, and things Karen had never even whispered about to me. I felt sick. I locked her phone and tossed it onto the bed, my mind racing. How long had this been going on? Who were these people? Did any of our friends know? And why the hell had she never said a word to me? I spent the rest of the night in a daze, the betrayal sinking in deeper with every minute. But this wasn't the end. No, I needed more. I needed to see this world for myself, and I knew exactly how to do it. The next few days, I could barely function. I went to work, picked up the kids, acted like everything was normal, but inside, I was drowning. Every time I looked at Karen, all I could see was her in that mask, laughing and touching strangers. My anger was growing, and I knew I couldn't just confront her. I needed to hit her where it hurt. I needed revenge. I hired a private investigator named Ray. I told him everything. The texts, the pictures, the parties. He didn't flinch. This wasn't his first case of infidelity, but I didn't just want proof. I wanted to catch her in the act, to see the look on her face when she realized her secret life had been exposed. Ray worked fast. Within days, he had everything. Pictures of Karen entering private clubs, meeting up with other couples. But the real jackpot came when he discovered an upcoming masquerade swinger party. Masks, anonymity, secret locations. It was the perfect cover for people like Karen. I knew what I had to do. I asked Ray to get me in. I didn't care how. I needed to be there, to see it all firsthand. Ray pulled some strings, and before I knew it, I had a mask, a fake name, and an invitation. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, wearing the black mask Ray had given me. I felt like a stranger to myself, my reflection looking back with eyes filled with fury. I wasn't the man Karen had married anymore. I wasn't the loving husband or the trusting father. I was someone else, someone who was about to walk into the darkest parts of his wife's life and tear it apart. I drove to the club, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't just about catching her. This was about revenge. I wasn't just going to watch. I was going to become part of her world, and she would never see it coming. The club was tucked away in a part of the city I'd never been to before. No signs, no bright lights, just a discreet entrance with a bouncer who checked my invitation. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with sensuality and secrecy. The lighting was dim, bathed in red hues, casting shadows over the velvet curtains that separated the rooms. I walked in, my mask secure, my eyes scanning the room. People lounged on plush couches, some in elegant evening wear, others in barely anything at all. There was a constant murmur of laughter, whispers, the clink of champagne glasses. It was a world removed from anything I had ever known, and yet it felt like I had stepped into the heart of Karen's betrayal. Then I saw her. Karen, wearing that same red mask from the photos, standing near the bar with a man I didn't recognize. Her laugh cut through the air, carefree, as if she hadn't a worry in the world. I felt the bile rise in my throat. This was real. My wife wasn't just cheating. She was thriving in this world. I stayed hidden, watching her interact with the others. She was comfortable here, at ease, like she belonged. As she and the man disappeared behind one of the curtains, my blood boiled. I couldn't just watch anymore. I followed them, slipping into the private room, my mind racing. Inside, the scene was worse than I imagined. Karen was with him, with another couple. The room was filled with soft moans, bodies entangled in each other, masked faces blurred by the low light. And there she was, lost in this sick fantasy, completely unaware of how far she had destroyed everything between us. The anger surged inside me. I wanted to pull her out of there, scream at her, make her feel the same pain I was drowning in. But I didn't. I stood there, watching, disgusted and fascinated all at once. This was my wife. This was the woman I had shared my life with. And she was unrecognizable. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't just going to watch anymore. I was going to participate. As I stood there in that room, the anger and betrayal swelling inside me, I made a decision I didn't think I was capable of. I was going to join them, not to enjoy it, not for pleasure, but to hurt Karen the way she had hurt me. If she could live this secret life, then so could I. If she could cross that line, so would I. I walked back into the main area of the club, scanning the crowd, my pulse still racing. The dim lights flickered over masked faces, men and women laughing softly, sipping their drinks, leaning close to whisper things I didn't want to imagine. I wasn't part of this world, but tonight I would be. I caught the eye of a woman standing by one of the velvet-lined couches. Her mask was silver, elegant, covering just enough of her face to leave her anonymous. Her eyes were dark, focused, and when she saw me looking at her, she smiled. A slow, knowing smile. She must have thought I was just another participant, just another man here to indulge in whatever fantasies they had cooked up. And in that moment, I decided to play the part. I moved toward her, my mask hiding the fury and disgust boiling inside me. She tilted her head, gesturing for me to join her. Behind us, I could still hear the low sounds coming from the private rooms, including the one where Karen was. But I forced myself to focus on the woman in front of me. We didn't speak. There was no need for words. She reached for my hand and led me behind one of the heavy curtains, into a room bathed in red light, where two other people were already waiting. They were similarly masked, their bodies moving together in an intimate dance. I felt a wave of nausea, but I pushed it down. I was here now. There was no turning back. The next hour was a blur of skin, sweat, and sound. The woman in the silver mask was skilled, her touch practiced, but I felt nothing. No pleasure, no connection, just a cold emptiness as I went through the motions. I wasn't there to enjoy it. I was there to break something, to cross that line and make Karen feel the same betrayal I did. But as it went on, the numbness began to give way to something worse: guilt. The more I immersed myself in this world, the more I realized how deep I had fallen. I wasn't just watching Karen betray me anymore. I was part of it. I was becoming the very thing I hated. When it was over, I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. I just felt empty. I left the room without a word, pulling the mask from my face as soon as I was out of sight. The party continued around me, but I was done. I had gotten my revenge, but it had cost me something I didn't know I could lose: myself. I drove home that night in silence, the hum of the car engine the only sound that filled the space around me. I felt detached, as if I were watching someone else's life unfold. The things I had done at that party, the lines I had crossed, none of it felt real. But it was. It was all real, and I couldn't take any of it back. When I got home, Karen was already there. She was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone like it was any other night. My heart pounded in my chest, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from the weight of what I knew I had to do. I stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching her. She didn't even look up. How long had she been doing this? How many nights had she sat there, pretending everything was normal, while secretly living this other life? I walked into the room, the sound of my footsteps finally catching her attention. She looked up, surprised. "You're home late," she said casually, like it wasn't strange at all. She had no idea what I had seen, what I had done. "Yeah," I said, my voice cold. "I went out." There was a long pause, her eyes narrowing as she tried to read my expression. "Out where?" "Where you were," I replied, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Her face went pale. She stared at me, her lips parting slightly as she processed what I had just said. "What are you talking about?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the black mask, tossing it onto the table between us. "I was at the party, Karen. I saw everything." She stared at the mask, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for it. You were there?" Her voice was barely a whisper, disbelief mixed with panic. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "I saw you. And I wasn't just watching." Karen's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. "What do you mean?" "I joined," I said bluntly. "I did what you did. I slept with other people. I became part of your world." For a moment, Karen looked like she might collapse. She stood up, backing away from the table, her hand covering her mouth as tears welled up in her eyes. "No, you didn't." "I did," I snapped. "Just like you. Now we're both in this." "How does it feel, Karen? How does it feel to know that we're both lying, both betraying everything we built together?" She started to cry, but I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anything. I had crossed that line, and now we were both broken. "Why?" she whispered through her tears. "Why would you do that?" "Because I needed you to know what it feels like," I said. "I needed you to know the pain you've caused me. But now I realize that it doesn't fix anything. We're both ruined, and I don't think we can ever come back from this." Karen was sobbing now, her body trembling as she collapsed into a chair. She didn't even try to defend herself. She knew it was over. Everything we had built, our marriage, our life together, had been shattered in one night. And the worst part? I didn't feel anything. No satisfaction, no relief, no closure. Just emptiness. Her words were barely coherent through the tears. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I was just lost." I stared at her, my face expressionless. It felt surreal. The woman sitting in front of me wasn't the Karen I had married. She wasn't the woman who laughed with me, shared our dreams, or made promises of a future together. This was someone else. Someone who had been hiding in plain sight, and I had been too blind to see it. "Lost?" I repeated, my voice cold. "You weren't lost, Karen. You made choices. You made choices every time you went to one of those parties, every time you put on that mask, every time you laughed with those people. Don't pretend like this just happened. You chose this." She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. I know I did. But I never meant to hurt you. I never wanted this." I shook my head. "You didn't want to hurt me, But you didn't care enough to stop, either. You didn't care enough to be honest, to tell me what you were doing. You just let it keep going, while I sat here thinking our marriage still meant something. Her sobs grew quieter, but her eyes were still red and swollen. What do we do now? That question hit me harder than I expected. What do we do now? I hadn't thought about that. I had been so focused on my revenge, on catching her in the act, that I hadn't even considered the future. I didn't know if we could move forward from this. I didn't know if I even wanted to try. I leaned against the kitchen counter, running a hand over my face. I don't know. I don't know if we can fix this. I don't know if I even want to. The silence between us stretched on for what felt like hours. Karen wiped her eyes, her hands shaking as she tried to compose herself. I'll do anything to make this right, she whispered. Anything. But the truth was, there was nothing left to make right. I didn't believe her. Maybe she was sorry now, but it didn't change what she had done. And it didn't change what I had done either. We had both crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said, my voice low. And I don't know if I can forgive myself either. Her eyes widened in shock, as if she hadn't expected me to feel guilt. You shouldn't blame yourself. I started this. It's my fault. Maybe, I said, shrugging. But I made the choice to follow you into that world. I did things I never thought I would do, and now, I don't even recognize myself. This isn't who I wanted to be. Karen bit her lip, her face pale. What do you want? I don't know, I admitted. All I know is that I can't stay here. Not now. I need time to think. I need space. She looked like she was about to protest, but then she nodded slowly. I understand. I stood up, pushing the chair back as I headed for the door. I'll stay somewhere else for a while. We'll figure out the rest later. She didn't stop me. As I walked out, the weight of everything we had lost hung heavy in the air. It wasn't just our marriage that was broken. It was us. I spent the next few days at a small cabin by the lake, the same place Karen and I used to go when we needed to escape the stresses of life. It felt like a lifetime ago, back when things were simple, when we were just a couple trying to make things work. Now, it was a place to figure out what came next. I spent hours sitting by the water, staring at the ripples as they spread across the lake's surface, thinking about the past few weeks. Everything had happened so fast. From the moment I cracked her phone to the moment I walked out of our house. It was like I had been on autopilot, driven by anger, betrayal, and the need for revenge. But now, with the stillness of the lake around me, I could feel the full weight of what had happened. The worst part wasn't just that Karen had betrayed me. It was that I had betrayed myself. I had crossed a line I never thought I would. I had become someone I didn't recognize. The revenge I thought would give me satisfaction had only left me feeling more hollow. I thought that by sleeping with those other women at the party, I would hurt Karen the way she hurt me. But instead, I had only hurt myself. I didn't regret confronting her. I didn't regret finding out the truth, but I regretted the way I had handled it. I let my anger drive me to a place I never should have gone. And now, there was no going back. The lake was quiet, peaceful, but my mind wasn't. I kept thinking about the kids. How was this going to affect them? They didn't know what was happening yet, but they would soon. We couldn't hide this from them forever. I didn't want them to grow up in a house full of lies and tension. They deserved better than that. I thought about Karen, too. She was broken, just like I was. But the difference was, she had been living with this secret for months, maybe even longer. She had been able to hide it, to act like everything was fine while she was destroying our marriage piece by piece. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her for that. But as much as I hated what she had done, I couldn't hate her completely. There was still a part of me that loved her, that missed the person she used to be. The person we both used to be before all of this. That was the hardest part. The realization that the life I had known, the life I had thought was solid, was built on a foundation of lies. As the sun set over the lake, I made my decision. I couldn't stay here forever. I had to go back and face the reality of what had happened. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I couldn't run from it anymore. When I returned home, the air felt heavier than I remembered, as if the weight of everything that had happened still hung over the house. Karen wasn't there when I arrived, which was probably for the best. I wasn't ready to see her yet, wasn't ready to face the raw emotions that had been simmering since that night. The kids were staying with her parents, unaware of the storm brewing between us. I stood in the living room, looking around at the framed photos on the wall, pictures of us smiling, holding hands, celebrating birthdays, and playing with the kids. It all felt so distant, like those moments belonged to another life, one that was irreparably gone. I took a deep breath and started packing. Clothes, a few essentials, whatever I could fit into a couple of suitcases. I wasn't planning on leaving everything behind, but I couldn't stay here either. Karen and I needed space, and I needed time to figure out what came next. The house, once a place filled with laughter and warmth, now felt cold and empty, a shell of the life we used to have. As I packed, my phone buzzed. It was Karen. I hesitated before opening the message. Karen, can we talk? When you're ready, please. I stared at the screen for a long time, unsure of how to respond. Part of me wanted to lash out, to tell her we had nothing to talk about. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the woman I loved, knew we couldn't avoid this conversation forever. The kids needed stability, and despite everything, we were still their parents. Me, I'll be here for a couple of hours. You can come by. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. I didn't know if this conversation would be civil or turn into a screaming match. But one thing was certain. We had to face the wreckage of our marriage head-on. An hour later, Karen showed up. She looked tired, her face pale, eyes swollen from crying. She walked into the house cautiously, as if unsure of her place in the home we had built together. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, watching her, waiting for her to speak. I thought you'd still be at the lake, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I came back to pack, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I needed to be here, to figure things out. She nodded, her eyes flicking to the suitcases by the door. So you're leaving? For now, I said. I don't know what's going to happen, but I can't stay here. We both need space. Karen swallowed hard, her eyes brimming with tears. What about the kids? What are we going to tell them? The kids. That was the hardest part. They were innocent in all of this, and yet their lives were about to be turned upside down. I hadn't figured out what to say, and I doubted Karen had either. We need to tell them together, I said. They don't need to know everything, but they need to understand that things are going to be different. Karen nodded, her face crumpling as she sank into one of the kitchen chairs. I ruined everything, didn't I? I didn't know how to answer that. On one level, yes, she had made choices that had shattered our marriage. But I wasn't without blame either. I had chosen revenge, had stepped into her world instead of confronting the issue head-on. We were both broken. It wasn't just you, I said finally, the words feeling heavy in my throat. I played my part too. Karen looked up at me, her eyes searching mine. But I started it. I hurt you, and I kept hurting you. And now I've lost everything. I sighed, leaning against the counter, staring out the window at the yard where the kids used to play. I don't know if we can fix this, Karen. I don't know if we should even try. She didn't respond right away. The silence stretched between us, thick with the weight of everything that had gone unsaid for months. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Do you still love me? The question hung in the air like a knife, cutting through whatever composure I had left. Did I still love her? A part of me wanted to say no, to push her away and walk out the door without looking back. But another part of me, the part that remembered who we were before all of this, felt something deeper, something more complicated. I don't know, I admitted. I don't know if I can love you the way I used to. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. The truth was, I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if we could rebuild, if there was anything left worth saving. But I knew one thing. We couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. We couldn't stay in this limbo, half in and half out of each other's lives. We need time, I said softly. Time to figure out who we are now, after all of this. But right now, we need to be there for the kids. Karen wiped her eyes, her expression one of defeat. You're right. The kids come first. We talked for another hour, laying out a plan to explain things to the kids. It wasn't going to be easy, but at least we could face it together, as parents, if nothing else. As Karen left, I felt a strange sense of relief. We had finally acknowledged the broken pieces of our marriage, and while the future was uncertain, I knew that we had taken the first step toward moving forward. Whether we would do it together or apart, only time would tell. A few days later, we sat down with the kids. Karen and I had rehearsed what we were going to say, but it didn't make it any easier. They were young, too young to understand the complexity of what had happened between us. But they weren't oblivious. They could sense the tension, the way things had changed. We told them, as gently as we could, that Mom and Dad were going to live in different houses for a while, that it wasn't their fault, that we both still loved them, and that things would be okay. But the tears still came. The confusion, the fear. They didn't want things to change, and in that moment, I wished we could have given them the stable, happy family they deserved. But we couldn't. The damage was done. After the conversation, Karen took the kids to her parents' house for the weekend. I stayed behind, finishing my packing, getting ready to move into the small apartment I had rented across town. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and for the first time in months, I felt like I had control over something in my life. As I stood in the empty house, the echo of footsteps bouncing off the walls, I realized that this was the start of something new. I didn't know what the future held, whether Karen and I would ever find a way back to each other, or whether this was truly the end. But for now, it was time to focus on healing, on rebuilding. The apartment was small but comfortable. I unpacked slowly, placing the few things I had brought with me on the shelves and in the drawers. It felt strange, starting over like this, but also freeing. I didn't have to answer to anyone. I could take the time I needed to figure out who I was now, without the weight of my broken marriage hanging over me. I spent the next few weeks getting into a routine. Work, picking up the kids on the weekends, trying to keep things as normal as possible for them. Karen and I kept our conversations civil, focusing on co-parenting, but there was a distance between us that I didn't know if we could ever bridge. One night, after putting the kids to bed at the apartment, I sat by the window, looking out at the quiet street below. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the revenge, the anger and hurt that had consumed me for so long. And for the first time, I felt lighter. Not healed, not whole, but lighter. I had been through hell, but I had come out the other side. There was still a long road ahead, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid to walk it.